22 часа 28 минут. Масса...
We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Dragon deploy verified.
This is Spacevidcast 5.13 for September 1st, 2012. My name is Benjamin Higginbotham. With me, as always, the beautiful, lovely, wonderful, talented Carrie Ann Higginbotham. Always. And we'll be your hosts for this show. We've been off for a little while, so we've got a ton of news. Some of the stuff is a little bit older, but very recently, somewhat tragic thing happened. Neil Armstrong, the first human to ever step foot not only on the moon, but on an alien surface. Right? Has passed away after some heart complications. He went in for some heart surgery. He looked like he was doing better, and then complications arose, and he's no longer with us. And that's kind of a sad moment. I don't want to start the show off on a really super sad note, but
apparently you do.
I did. But it does bring up an interesting topic, which is the lunar astronauts are getting older. Right, you look at
you think?
Well, you look at Buzz, and you know he's starting to show his age as well.
Right.
And on XKCD, they had a humorous and depressing graphic all at the same time. If you look at this, you got the year across the bottom, and it's the number of living humans who have walked on another world. And if you look at the 95th percentile, assuming that they're going to live as long as they possibly can, by 2035. All of them will have passed. And unless we put a human on the surface of an alien world, such as the moon or Mars, before 2035, there is a chance that since 1970 we will have had 12 astronauts who have stepped on the moon on an alien body. Then since then, the number has steadily declined until it reaches 0 in 2035. Now, it's my hope that someone somewhere will do something about this before that happens.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be anyone in particular. Maybe it'll be China, maybe it'll be SpaceX, maybe it'll be the Space Launch System from NASA. But it would be awesome if we never take a step backwards.
Right.
You know what I mean? If we keep moving forward and continue to do more awesome and amazing things. So yeah, not a great day, but and you kind of look at it, maybe this will light a fire under a few people's heinies to get things going.
Makes things a little bit more real, I guess.
But on a happier note, I guess, Ariane Space has launched its 50th successful flight in a row.
5-0.
5-0, that's a lot of them. And when you consider that space flight is pretty much a controlled explosion, right? That's an impressive feat. That's really awesome. And being that we are a space show, we figured, why don't we show you that launch? So here you go.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, top. Allumage Vulcain. Allumage UAV, décollage. les paramètres à bord sont normaux.
So the chat room is asking, I don't think I said Atlas. I said Arion. Arion 5, not Atlas
Which
5.
are two different.
Two completely different vehicles.
things.
Hopefully I didn't accidentally say Atlas.
Yeah,
Arion.
Sometimes
Arion.
you're speaking and you don't always know exactly what you're saying. And,
so that was
yeah.
Arion 5, their 50th launch that happened in August. So awesome, good for them.
Yeah.
And they've got they've actually got a full lineup of vehicles now. They've got the Vega launcher, the Soyuz launcher, and the Arion launcher to kind of fill the low, medium, high needs. So that's pretty awesome. Moving forward,
Yes.
continually, China
Yes.
wants to put a rover on the moon. Check this out.
Well, lander rover combo, yes?
Yes, lander rover combo. And so I didn't have a picture of it.
Of course. I wish you could see my face right now because I'm very confused.
That's not what.
Apparently, China's already done that with the American flag slapped on the back and a little dude up there. I guess their lander is a dude.
Yeah, so.
That's entertaining. So, yeah, obviously, we didn't have a picture of China's variation of the lander / rover or lander and rover combination. I'm assuming two different things. I assume they're not going to.
Well, they're going to land. They're going to land, and then they're going to drive the thing off and
right.
kind of do their thing.
We obviously didn't have a picture of theirs version.
If you read this article, which is interesting, it's a little propaganda-y-ish.
Okay, I want to say something really quickly because you
right.
said that, and then I read the article, which the article, by the way, is like 5 sentences.
It really is.
It's not even really an article. It's more like, here are 5 things. We put them together. They're all about the same sorts of things.
Right.
I think it could be a language thing. I think the interpretation of some of the words could be a little something. Because when you have the guy who's head of the lunar exploration program saying, of China's lunar exploration program, saying that this is the first time that it's ever been done, he might be misunderstood. Because it's the first time that China's lunar exploration program has ever done it in all of the history of China.
I read it as this is the first time anyone's landed a rover on the moon, and that is not true.
Right.
The Soviets did it in the 70s, and it was there for like over a year.
Right.
Right. So this is not a new. That was the first time it was done.
Right.
So maybe I misread the article. Maybe it's a language thing.
I understand. The thing is that the words that were said. But it could just be a language thing. And so I just want to put that out there. We're not down on China being able to, because it's their country, and if they want to put out the news,
all right.
and they want to say that.
But regardless, they're putting a lander on the moon, and that's a really big step to putting humans on the moon in the future.
huge.
And moving forward, they also need to be able to do things like get a bigger craft, bigger engines, which brings us to our next story. They're test firing a new engine for a Long March 5 rocket, and we happen to have a little bit of that footage. So here you go.
Was assembled 3 years ago and has already undergone 2 tests which lasted 600 seconds each. And today's test was to determine if it remains in peak condition. The engine can carry a load of 25 tons, and that's 16 tons more than the engine in the Long March 2F that carried the Shenzhou 9 mission last month. The new engine is filled with kerosene and liquid oxygen that enables a savings of almost 10 million yuan in propellant load. China is the second country in the world to master this technology after Russia. The engine will be used in a new Long March 5 rocket in 2014.
So first off, you had mentioned while we were watching this just off camera,
Well,
it's kind of beautiful with all the mountains and the trees in the background.
Yeah.
When you watch the NASA footage, just like the stand and nothing, right?
Well,
and there,
it's dirt, right? It's just sand.
yeah, it's just and that was just these gorgeous hills and trees. It looked pretty. But now going back to that same, that information's kind of wonky. They said that they're the second country, and it all depends on how you view it.
Right.
The second country after Russia to master a kerosene liquid oxygen engine, which again I don't believe to be true. So it could be a language thing, but
it could be the second country's program, right? A governmental program.
US did kerosene and lock stuff in the 60s
NASA
too.
did?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we've done kerosene and LOX before. Absolutely.
Well, they're
so they would be the third. No matter how you cut that, they'd be the third at minimum. Let alone a company
they're
like
the
Space.
second one behind Russia. There's Russia. If Russia did it before the U.S.
Oh man! All right, so they're
saying.
third, not second. They're third minimum. You could even consider that they're fourth, or I mean, even further down the chain.
Yeah.
Based on that, so. Yeah, I'll pop the graphic up one more time just so if you want to.
Yeah, please look at the
hit
article
the
yourself.
URL right there. You can. Well, it's not an article; it's the video. So
right.
Listen to the video, and I don't think it's a language thing, but regardless, this is an engine that allows them to take the next step towards going places like the moon. You're going to need heavier. Larger engines to make stuff like that go. Actually, I'm going to do this out of order because now, since we're talking about engines, I should have put the other engine story next to this one. I know, right? You think I would have thought of that. And that is, NASA is also looking to upgrade engines. So the story is Space Launch System. This is the next generation rocket that NASA is looking to
sometimes also referred to as SLS.
SLS, right? So it's going to theoretically look something like this. Now, the first Space Launch System is going to bring approximately 70 tons to low Earth orbit. But they're looking to expand past that. And so what they're looking to do is upgrade the F1 engine, and that was the engine in the Saturn V. The Saturn V is the rocket that brought our astronauts to the moon. These engines are freakishly here. Check this out. Those are just the bells of the engine. That's not even the whole engine. That's just the part the fire comes out of. Right. They go up further from there for the actual plumbing part of it. Those things are freakishly huge, right?
Right.
So they're looking to, after the initial engine, because the Space Launch System will initially use the same engines that are used on the Space Shuttle, they're going to reuse those, but instead of reusing the engines like they did on the Space Shuttle, they're going to drop right into the ocean, just like a traditional rocket, right? So you've got X number of Space Shuttle engines, you're going to drop them into the ocean, and then you're going to run out. Well, when you run out of engines, what do? Well, since they're already looking to upgrade the Space Launch System to a 130-ton vehicle.
Which, what is it now?
Well, right now it's a paper rocket.
Okay.
So it doesn't exist right now. But the first version will be 70 tons. Okay. So this will be almost double the capacity.
Right.
When they look to do that, they're going to need much bigger, stronger engines for that.
Right.
And so I almost view it as a completely different rocket because you're going to have totally different engines. Your boosters, which right now will be these 5-segment solid rocket boosters that were designed for the initial Ares project, right?
Yes.
So those will probably be replaced with a liquid booster.
Yes.
We don't know yet, right? It's all paper rocket at this point. So really interesting stuff, but they're at least exploring building these mightily huge engines again. I thought that was a really interesting story.
Somebody said coffee table huge.
Coffee table huge. Oh, that's a fun. Stay with us for After Dark and we'll talk about that again if you don't understand the reference, but that's old school Spacevidcast right there. So they're looking to upgrade the engine on the Space Launch System. And speaking of the Space Launch System, it recently passed a major agency review. And it's actually, so basically what they've said is, yeah, we think we can do this, sort of, kind of. And now they're going to move on to...
So instead of being just a paper rocket, like flat paper rocket, now we're going to make a 3-dimensional paper rocket?
No, instead of being it's not even a rocket on paper, now it's going to turn into a rocket on paper.
Ah, so it was a conceptual paper rocket?
It was a conceptual paper
rocket.
rocket.
Now we're going to actually write it down?
And now it's going to become a real paper rocket.
I was hoping for a Lego rocket.
Well, remember, every rocket goes through this, right?
Right.
You conceive it first, then you put it on paper, then you build some prototypes, then you build the real thing and test it, and then you build the real thing in bulk.
Right.
In bulk, right? So we're right now at the phase of we went from concept to more paper. It's always been on paper, but that's my analogy, if you will. So that's what's going on with that. And I know we're supposed
MCAD design, isn't it just zeros and ones?
Just zeros and ones. Before we go to break, speaking of experimental vehicles, this was fun, and I cut this up for you guys so you could see the cool bits. This is like a 10-minute video, so we sliced it down to 1 minute because it's like really interesting parts. Morpheus Lander. This is one of NASA's vertical takeoff, vertical landing, which means it can take off like this and then land back like this again. It is an experimental rocket, and as with all experimental craft, not just rockets, you will have problems.
And this is designed to be a lander on the moon, yes?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
I think it's just. I think
just wanted to be clear because it doesn't look like a traditional rocket. And so
I think it's designed more as a test bed just to kind of play with stuff. I don't think it actually has a purpose beyond playing.
okay, but it's supposed to be a lander, not
Yes.
like a rocket.
You don't put humans on it.
Right. I just want to be clear because sometimes, if this is the first time anyone's seen it, it doesn't look like a traditional rocket. It doesn't have that kind of.
It looks like a Northrop Grumman Lunar Lander X Prize Challenge or whatever they call it now.
Right.
So anyhow, this is the footage from that. You know, stuff happens. I believe there was an IMU failure 600 milliseconds after launch, and you can see the result of that.
5, 4, 3, 2, 0.
Ooh. Oh, that's not good. That's not good. Anyway, it's going to burn for a little while. Now, keep in mind, they do have rocket fuel on board, so a couple things are going to happen.
It's 4 of those ball tanks. You're so mean. 4 of those.
No, I'm not mean. I mean, it's part of. This is part of rocket science, right? Sometimes things are going to roll over and explode,
Right.
and here it goes
Stinger
again.
says landing is not nominal.
Non-nominal landing.
nominal.
Here we go again. Here it goes. Boom!
It is kind of pretty.
It is. It's beautiful.
terms
In
of
I mean,
fireworks.
obviously you don't ever wish for this to happen, but
No,
no
no.
one was hurt, and you learn data from it. They know what caused the problem, so at least we learned something. And at the very end, I just kind of show the fire trucks coming in and doing their thing.
Yes, they did for sure. I mean, they knew
Yeah,
this was
yeah.
experimental. They had the fire trucks right there,
Yeah. Boosh, boosh.
able to extinguish quite a bit, so the fire didn't go crazy, go nuts. But that's that's NASA trying out some new and different things.
All right, so let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about who should care about space and why. Stay with us. We'll be right back. I think you were talking about, we just saw the commercial for Twitter on the day Neil Armstrong passed. They made that video and talked about how many tweets that they had seen, and that was a large number of tweets. But then they were going to make it National Wink at the Moon Day.
Yeah, National Wink at the Moon Day. So going outside, and even if it's a new moon where you don't really see the moon, just going outside and appreciating, yes, winking at the moon, and that Neil would be winking back at you, is going to now be every August 25th, which is the day of his passing. So this first one, I guess, Wink at the Moon Day, was decided to be not just on the 25th, but then a lot of people actually came out for the blue moon that was in August 2012 this year, and wink at that one, which is
The moon is not actually blue.
No, it's not actually
Oh, that would be
blue.
cool.
It's actually kind of more this color, but it's the second full moon in 1 month,
Right.
which is kind of a rare occasion.
Rare-ish. Rare-esque.
Well, the next one that's coming up is 2014. So it's
I feel like we've had a lot of them recently.
sure. Well, it's the end of the world, so you got to have one more before you go. But yeah, so August 25th.
Speaking of the end of the world, we were talking before the show, and this actually isn't in the show notes anywhere, so we're just
Yay,
going to talk
off the rails.
Off
Let's go.
the rails. There is a Twitter account that allows you to, it will actually tweet you anytime the International Space Station is overhead and let you know, hey, you should run outside right now and look up.
Where'd it go?
Oh, look
It
up.
usually gives you like a 5-minute or 10-minute time lapse,
Right.
And a lot of times it'll tweet you earlier in the day, so you can say, "Hey, at 8:25 and 13 seconds p.m. today, that's when you should be going outside," which is really cool. And so it's called Twist, TWISST, and it's done exactly. Thank you, Chris Radcliffe. It's done by a guy in the Netherlands, actually, and he you subscribe to Twist and let them know what your location is. So I would say Los Angeles, things like that. And then it will tweet at you, hey, by the way, this is what's going on, which is kind of cool because a lot of us have Twitter, not just have Twitter, but have it, directly to our phones or, our other mobile devices and whatnot. And it was just kind of a cool little thing that wasn't necessarily interactive per se, other than you got this little nudge, little poke every once in a while.
But you can't use it anymore.
Well, it's a little bit up in the air at the moment. Twitter has really sort of locked down on spam in general on Twitter, because Twitter's getting gigantor, right? They're becoming really, really crazy. And one of the things that they've done in the past is limit how many times you can tweet out. Is that right? Is it tweet out or is API? I don't know the technical.
They have a bunch of limits. So there's a API. There are limits on how many times you can use the API, to how many people you can tweet to how many people you can tweet to that don't follow you back. I mean, there are just all of these rules and restrictions to try to help cut down on spam.
Right, and because of that, Twist on Twitter has been shut down because it's been labeled as spam to a certain extent. Because it doesn't really have the interaction. You're not like, hey, Twist, what's going on? And Twist doesn't say, hey, this is what's going on.
In fact, you don't even need to follow Twist. I think that's the core of the problem is Twist will send out all these messages to people that don't follow it back, and so it looks like a spam account. But there's no need for you to follow Twist. It just says, @BenCredible, go outside in 10 minutes and look up. And what an amazing account that is. And I understand Twitter's need to cut down on spam. At the same time, there should be an ability to create exceptions for this. They should be able to look at the service and say, oh, clearly you're not spam. Actually, this is kind of cool.
Right.
So I know that some high-profile people have already contacted Twitter directly. We're bringing this up because hopefully someone in the Spacevidcast community knows someone at Twitter, and or we're trying to find a call to action. Because this is a cool account, this isn't a spam account. You have to actually ask it, right? So it's not like it's just sending it to random people. You have to ask the service to send you those tweets.
Right.
So it is an opt-in
service all the way around.
So hopefully someone out there will say someone out there knows someone at Twitter that can do something. Otherwise, I implore the Spacevidcast community, just start tweeting at Twitter or contacting Twitter and saying, look, this isn't spam. I asked for this.
Right.
This is a really cool service.
And they create a hashtag save twist. Again, it's TWISS because it's the International Space Station. TWISST. And definitely tweet at Twitter and say, hey, at Twitter, what's going on?
The what?
Yeah, this is a really cool service. It's something I'm interested in, and it's just a nice, interesting way to get an ISS Notify. There is, of course, the Kickstarter project ISS Notify by our friend Nate who's normally in the chat room, where you get a cute little lamp. It's just this teeny tiny little thing. It's got a picture of the ISS on it.
And it glows.
And it glows whenever the ISS is going to be overhead, which is also a really cool, just a beautiful thing to have on your desk or in your living room or what have you. But the great thing about Twitter is that it's free, right? And so it's available to anybody and everyone who's got a connection.
And it's on your phone. But that brings us to the main topic of the story, which is, segment, which is who should care about space and why.
Right.
For example, we're fighting for these services because it's a great way to get people that are not normally engaged in space, engaged in space. And, is that a good thing or a bad thing, right? When you think about this, right? So we looked at the Morpheus accident, and we don't look at that and go, oh, what a waste of tax dollars, and oh, I can't believe they failed. We look at that as a normal part of the design process.
Right.
It's a normal part of learning and building and doing. And sometimes things don't go right. And that's true of anything you ever build ever, not just rockets.
Right.
But a lot of people are so adverse to failure. If we start bringing in and getting everyone interested in space, curiosity is another great example of this, right? Everyone started getting, because here's the thing, shows like Spacevidcast, we help a little bit, we keep the interest going, but really it's the people who do that get the interest. Like JPL landing on Mars successfully, that gets people interested. SpaceX berthing with the International Space Station for the space, that gets people interested.
And in a sad sort of way, Neil's passing has actually created also a lot of interest in stuff that happened before. I've seen a lot more stories on like Apollo 11. The guys actually originally couldn't get life insurance. And so what they did was they signed a whole bunch of stuff, a whole bunch of official Apollo 11 stuff for their families, so that, God forbid, when they did pass, that they could sell them off and have money. That was their sort of makeshift insurance plan.
Right.
There was another story that recently came out, sort of again, just rehashing some of this stuff about how when Apollo 11 came back, they actually had to go back through U.S. Customs in order to come home. Right?
That's funny.
So it's interesting stuff like that. It's these interesting little stories that, again, I'm very sorry for Neil passing, but it's interesting that it's becoming of this sort of fascination again with space in general.
But are they fascinated for the right or the wrong reasons?
Right, and that's kind of the debate.
And or is there no wrong reason? As long as people start looking up to the sky and start going, well, why aren't we there? They can start pushing their politicians, and the politicians, they're there to stay in the office. And if a majority of people start saying to them, look, we want to go to the moon, why aren't you doing anything about this? Maybe that's a good thing.
Right.
Or maybe, let's speak out of the other side of my mouth. I don't know the answer, by the way. I'm posing this question to you, the Spacevidcast community. Leave your comments in YouTube, on the Spacevidcast site, on Twitter, Facebook, wherever you like. So we're posing this question to you. Is this new resurgence in interest in space, which may only be a temporary thing, but is this a good thing or a bad thing for the overall community? The flip side of this coin is, people are saying, well, I don't understand how we could get to the moon in 10 years and now it takes us 25 with modern technology.
Right.
Without fully understanding or appreciating the situation of, we did it in 10 for all the wrong reasons.
Right.
And that's why we haven't been back. And we don't want to do that again.
Right.
Now, that's not to say that 20 or 25 is good either, right? Just being overly cautious could be bad too. So, how does this all actually balance out? What is the right type of person that should be interested in space? Or maybe it's everyone. Maybe everyone should be interested in space regardless, because it's what makes us better, striving to be something better than we already are.
There you go.
So what do you think?
I kind of have one of those weird, I have the completely optimistic point of view about space in general. I would love to see a Starfleet or something along those lines.
You visited where Starfleet's supposed to go, didn't you?
Yes,
in San Francisco?
I did. It
Yep.
has a beautiful view.
Open field.
Yes. Well, anyhow, that's not really the point, I guess. But I think anybody and everybody can be interested in their own way, right? Like, artists are completely. There's an entire line. There's a clothing line called blackmilk.com. I want to say that they're a Kiwi line, or they're out of Australia or something along those lines, who have taken these magnificently beautiful images from Hubble and put them onto clothing, right? So fashion is inspired, and artists are inspired, and sci-fi is inspired by real science, and engineers can be inspired, and girls can be inspired, and boys can be inspired, and I just think it's really interesting, and maybe you're really into food, but you want to figure out how to cook the food that the astronauts are going to eat on the ISS or on the way to Mars, or things like that. I think are just fascinating. I think everyone in their own way can be inspired and motivated by space and the human outreach.
What's interesting is, these debate, because all of this is so hard and it takes so much money, there's all this debate that goes around it. BioDruid1 in the chat room just said the moon is a distraction we can't afford. And, is it? Right? Maybe we can. Maybe it's not a distraction. Maybe it's something that will get people revved up about space. Maybe we know there are raw materials there.
The interesting thing for me personally about the moon, and I'm sure I've said this before, is that it's the one place that I can look up in the sky, assuming it's not a cloudy day or cloudy night, and see and say, we've been there. Humans have been there, and I can see it just almost every single night. And we've joked about, like, if Ben and I were to live on the moon, and how sort of sad that might be. And we actually had this conversation while we were living in Minnesota, right next to our families. And I said, if we move away, if we move to California, for instance, I can't just look across our continent and say, oh, my family's right there, and feel this sort of sense of closeness. But if we were to live on the moon and they were in Minnesota, they could look up at us and we could look down at them and say,
yeah, but what happens
"That's
when we
where
put
they
humans
are."
on Mars? Because Mars is way harder, right?
You're
It's
right.
just a
Mars
speck
is
in the sky.
way harder. Mars is way, way harder. Don't get me wrong. But that's the draw for me with the moon and getting humans there, I guess.
But who should be, going back to the main topic though, who should everyone care about this? Or is that going to get in the way of the people trying to do the real science?
One of the main...
Not to sound insulting to anyone else, but there is real science.
To go on a slightly different track, one of the main sort of deterrent, or one of the main arguments I keep hearing about, we shouldn't be going to space, we have enough problems down here on Earth. But going to space helps you figure out solutions to those problems here on Earth. We're recycling water in space.
Yeah, but the flip side of that argument is if you were to concentrate that same amount of money towards those problems here on Earth, you're going to solve them all the same anyhow.
Are you?
Maybe.
Not necessarily. Sometimes you have to look at a completely different point of view in order to find a solution.
Yeah, but I'm never a huge fan of the spin-off technology argument, because if you're doing something simply for the spin-offs, then I don't think that you're doing it right.
I'm not doing it for the spin-offs necessarily, but there are a lot of people who can, and that's their focus, and that's their interest, and that's where they want to look at things. And maybe there's some water expert that's down here who doesn't have an interest in space per se, but if we, no pun intended, if we tapped their intelligence, their vast knowledge to help us figure out some filtration systems for space, that maybe they could still use that technology as a spin-off down here on Earth, right?
So what's your view? What's your comment? We'd love to hear from you guys. Again, leave it in YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, email it to us, leave it on our wiki actually. And what we really enjoy the most are the video comments that you guys leave. And we'll air those back in the show, because we're about to go to break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about comments from our last few shows that you guys had. We love to talk and continue the conversation with you guys. Video comments on YouTube are precious, like a 60-second quick little video comment. We love those. If you want to be guaranteed a spot in the show, do one of those. All right, when we come back, like I said, viewer comments. Stay with us.
Look into her face, determination in her eyes. She won't give up or quit or fall for little fashion lies. Filled with awesome expectation, this girl's a fascination. And nothing in her way will keep her from her destination. 'Cause she's fire walking, she's fire walking. When it's hot, she keeps on moving. Through the heat, keeps on improving. Yeah, she's fire walking, she's fire walking to be free.
And as you saw, there are no rocket launches, but two really cool features or things is next launch on Twitter until they get shut down, and that, and that actually will tweet out when the next launch is going to happen. So right there, on your Twitter stream, you can say, "Oh, hey, I need to log into whoever's going to air that
is
live."
Rick in the chat room?
Rick Mann?
Yeah.
I don't know.
He's not, but somebody in the chat room had a really good suggestion of putting the twist. The ISS notifications, make that part of the
Mission Clock?
Mission Clock.
And that was the second thing in the break. Mission Clock is an awesome application for iOS devices, for your iPhone, iPad, iPod Touch. It is hands down my favorite space application on any platform, and you can get that in the App Store.
An Android variation, but
is he really? I heard he wasn't doing that at all.
No, I heard he was.
Oh, I thought he said no.
Oh, all right. Well,
so,
maybe I'm wrong.
So let's talk about viewer comments from the last show. This one came to us from our wiki. This is actually, if you don't know, Spacevidcast does have a wiki at wiki.spacevidcast.com, and that not only can you ask your questions inside of the wiki in the little chat area, but you can get answers, and you can see what's coming up on the show, all the news items. You can even get basic information on other flights. It's a really great resource, and anyone can contribute. It's free, right? So just kind of create an account and participate in the wiki. But here's the statement or question is: do you have any insights on the rocket engine of Spaceship Two? Is it a complete new development, or does it take so long to get the concept from Spaceship One working properly for passenger flights? For those who don't know, Spaceship One won the Ansari X Prize by flying to the boundary of space successfully with a human and essentially two humans, but it was really one human on board, one human and dummy weight. on board, and doing that more than once. And Sir Richard Branson of the Virgin Group of companies came in and said, look, I've got this holding company, Virgin Galactic. I want to take that spaceship and make it bigger and allow more passengers on to actually fly into space. And so Virgin Galactic was born, and their ships are Spaceship 2 and White Knight 2, built after just larger versions of Spaceship 1 and White Knight 1. However, larger doesn't mean the same. That means different engine, and it is, while it is fundamentally the same technology, it is a totally different engine, and they're building it in-house. They've been having issues with the engine, and they've basically said in no uncertain terms, look, we're going to fly when it's safe and not a moment before. Right. And so...
which you have to respect.
You know, that's what the holdup is.
We all want it to go yesterday.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right? We all want to be.
It's another one of those things that gets people like revved up. A lot of people are going to go, oh, that's all for the rich and blah blah blah. But what you don't remember is that, you know, airlines were much the same way. Now they're commonplace, right? And this is going to open up a whole slew of stuff we can't even imagine today.
And it's always nice to have people who are interested in doing it. You know, Richard Branson has tickets. I mean, I'm sure he didn't necessarily buy them, but you know, he's got tickets. He wants to do this. It's his motivation. It's his baby. It's not like some guy who doesn't care about this stuff who just happened to buy this company and yeah, we'll get to it. Like they're doing it as fast as they possibly can and as safely as they possibly can, as efficiently as they possibly can, because they want this to go. They want this to work. Which I find kind of nice.
Yep, so it's exciting for when it will work. It is a new, to answer your question, it is essentially a new engine, and that's what's taking so long. All right, saying China is catching up with the U.S. in the same episode you show the MSL landing, or Mars Science Laboratory, appears contradictory to me.
Which I love this comment. I read
I actually agree.
And I laughed out loud. I read it and was like, that's awesome. Like,
well, I think it just goes to show how vast the U.S. space program is. China is catching up to certain aspects of it, and there's actually consistent debate in our chat room, our live chat room at spacevidcast.com if you watch the episode live, as to whether they really are catching up with us, or maybe they're really catching up with the Soviet space program. They're closer to that.
Yeah, there's so many different ways you can look at this debate. Another way you can look at it is as apples and oranges. Okay, yes, they're both fruit, but one is the human, space program, and one is the non-human. It's the robotic space program.
I think it is a valid,
completely different things.
I think it's a valid comment, though.
It's still a valid comment, absolutely.
It's an interesting way to look at it, and I can't necessarily disagree with it. So I thought I would bring up in the show as that's kind of true. It just shows that, like you said, it's not apples to oranges. Even China to Russia is not apples to oranges, and certainly China to the U.S. isn't either. So
apples to apples?
Apples to apples. It is apples to oranges, whatever. You know what I meant. You insert the correct words and use those. I think we should really look to the other methods of propulsion than just rockets. This applies especially in launching from Earth to space. The fuel is expensive, the rocket is basically a bomb, and frankly, it isn't the most effective way to get from ground to space. Why aren't there designs utilizing a gradual ascent, maybe like a plane with small rockets to boost it up after it reaches max altitude using fuel? Well, there are, actually.
There are.
Multiple designs. In fact, one of them is known as the Pegasus, which basically launches off a plane. Spaceship 1, White Knight 1, Spaceship 2, White Knight 2 is a plane design. There were other designs with the space shuttle that does this exact same thing.
Well, space elevator competitions have been going on forever.
Yeah, so that's not even, we're not going to touch, let's not even touch space elevators at this point.
I'm just saying, there's lots of different ways that people are looking into these things.
But there are a couple things that people, I don't think, realize. And one is the fuel is not that expensive. When you look at the cost of a launch, let's call it $300 million. Of that $300 million, only about $250,000 is fuel. The rest of it is rocket and everything else that goes around it, the actual running of said rocket and the infrastructure around said rocket. So, $250,000 as opposed to $300 million for the, that's not a lot of money. I mean, it's still a lot of money, but in relative scale, it's not. So the real cost comes into not being able to reuse the rocket. Essentially, imagine this. You fly 747, you go from destination to destination A to destination B, you pay for your ticket, and after you reach destination B, you take the airplane and dump it in the ocean, and you go build a brand new airplane to get back to where you were going.
That would make
every
layovers
single time.
really annoying.
Yeah,
That
would make air flight super expensive. That's the problem with space flight. And certainly propulsion is a controlled explosion, but that's not the high cost in space flight. So if we can make craft reusable, I think Spaceship 2, White Knight 2, that will help a lot. X-Core, they're doing some stuff. Now those are suborbital vehicles only, but you baby steps, right? Start, make it bigger. The other point is the energy required to get to low Earth orbit is not trivial. Right. The energy difference between suborbital and orbital spaceflight also is not trivial. And so the amount that you're going to gain from going up as high as you can and then launching from there is trivial. It actually makes very little sense. And this is where I don't understand the new one. It's basically White Knight 3. Someone in the chat room help me. Stratolaunch, there we go. Which is basically taking a 747, chopping it in half, and then taking just taking a rocket and launching it from there. I don't understand that a whole lot. So hopefully that answers your question as to why we do that. One of them is, you noticed my comment. I almost worried Spacevidcast was too popular for my thought to be noticed. Now though I'm worried that it's not too popular why it isn't too popular for my thought to be noticed. That's hard to read. I'm going to do more to tweet about Spacevidcast, etc. Well, even as we do become more popular, and we have grown over the years, we do make it an effort to make sure that we continue to stay attached to you guys and comment and talk with you, not at you. So we do scour the web and spend quite a bit of time reading and looking at every single comment and trying to respond to as many as we can. And we'll continue to do that even as we get more popular. Having said that, absolutely tweet about us. Get everyone excited, right? This is a fun conversation. We like to get people excited about space. We like to have these conversations. You know, we're not a news site. We're not trying to break news. We're trying to get you excited about space. And the more people that watch, the more people that participate, the better. I think it creates a more dynamic and fluid conversation, so long as everyone behaves, right? So people will disagree. Just remember to behave.
You said that, and I scoured the chat room really quickly to see if everyone was behaving. You guys are doing fine.
And speaking of the last show we did, I thought this was just a funny comment from Crazy Dave. This just goes to show you should always watch the show to the bitter end.
The bitter
end, because the shows themselves are fun, but at the very, very end, we did have that gopher clip on the last show, and
it was cute.
Yeah.
And we finally got that show out, right?
Oh yeah, it's out.
Because
all right, so back to some more hardcore, less talking about us comments. Colonization attempts on Earth were of private entrepreneur origin. Hunt for wealth for the financial backers and a better life for the settlers. It's hard to see that happening on Mars without that element. Yes and no. I mean, we've got some very large entities looking at trying to find ways to essentially make money on Mars. And I'm not sure, everyone seems to think that, not everyone, but a good chunk of people seem to think that the business model will be sending back raw materials, and that's just not realistic. It just doesn't make sense unless Earth starts running out of materials.
That's why asteroid mining is so interesting.
Well, asteroid mining is, but even then, the material they're going to look at first is water.
Right.
So the thing with Mars is that you're going to learn stuff, you're going to be forced to learn stuff way faster than anywhere else. You're going to be...
The bell curve on that is going to be crazy.
You will have to learn how to survive, or you will die. And so you are forced to use your brain in that. And so the export from Mars is intellectual property more than anything else. The export from Mars is this knowledge that we learn on how to live on these alien. And keep in mind, you can use a lot of that back here on Earth for some of the hostile environments and how you can actually grow crops in really weird areas.
The interesting thing, though, is we can also use some of the technologies that have been developed here on Earth in some really crazy places, right? Like polar ice caps and whatnot, or desert areas for up there as well.
Right.
It's a give and take relationship, I think.
So it doesn't have to be Mars, by the way. You pick a surface, and there's a different thing at each one. You mentioned asteroid mining. That is finding water. And one other really interesting aspect of sending humans into space is while getting resources back here is difficult to do today, we do have a finite number of resources. We have a finite number of critical resources, specifically things like fresh water. pick stuff. So when you start running out of these resources, then every new human on the planet is someone you're competing with for those resources. And that's not a very happy world that we would want to live in. So
Snooki's going to have more children. You know what's going to happen.
So being able to live in a world where the resources are not finite, where we can go out to space and grab more resources as needed. Well, now I'm no longer competing with everyone for these resources. That's actually a much better place to live. So I think that sending humans up to the stars, not just robots, but humans to the stars, is critical to maintaining an optimistic view of the world, as opposed to a pessimistic, everything's going to go all to hell. And finally, I disagree with the tone of the face video because I think the best thing that's happened in NASA is cutting the fat. Sorry to people who've lost their jobs, but this will help NASA make their new goal-oriented decisions rather than focus on keeping projects alive. I think this was a necessary first step in starting a new space program which can send people to Mars for 2030 without costing the world. So I agree and disagree. Certainly, you know, the more lean you can make it, the better. Part of the reason we cut Apollo is because it was so expensive. Ironically, the space shuttle was more expensive, which it was not supposed to be. But the point is, NASA is a jobs program not because of NASA, but because of our senators. NASA doesn't have a good focused mission, not because of NASA, but because of our senators. It's the politicians who run NASA right now. It's not the NASA engineers. And that's the sad part of NASA at this point in time. And if
regardless of how small, how flexible, how amazing those people are, and a lot of them are, it's
still a jobs programs for the senators in those districts. So
that's not their fault.
What would help NASA a great deal is actually having a singular mission on a single, in my opinion, my personal opinion, NASA's best hope for the future is to dump all of these requirements for this space launch system and everything else, dump all of the stuff that they're required to do and make their mission simple. NASA's missions should be one sentence long, and it should be tweetable, and it should be something along the lines of NASA's job is to seed humanity into the whole solar system. That's it. That's their job. Maybe they do that with robots, maybe they do that with people, maybe they do that with SLS. Let NASA decide. Let the engineers decide. Don't let the senators build a rocket, which is how we end up with SLS. All right, that's our show. Again, we'd love to hear your comments, your feedback, agree, disagree, whatever you want to say, leave it on YouTube. We love those video comments back. Leave it like 60 seconds. You know, don't add music because that creates copyright stuff. Just, you know, what did you think? Boom, boom, boom. Be civil. You're allowed to disagree, obviously. We're not always right. You're allowed to agree. We're always right. So, I'm always right. I'm going to get so much slack for that. Otherwise, you can also at Spacevidcast on Twitter. We've got a Facebook page, facebook.com/SpaceVidcast. Like I said, we'd love to hear from you. That is our show. For those of you watching live, stay tuned. After Dark is up next. If you're not watching live and would like to watch Spacevidcast After Dark, you can do that by signing up to Spacevidcast Epic. Epic is our paid program. It's $10 a month or $100 a year, and that allows you to get extra stuff from us, and that money helps us produce the show, and it helps us buy new equipment, pay for the bandwidth costs, and can keep doing this hopefully week after week after week. And your Epic subscription is what makes it all go. So spacevidcast.com/epic, and you'll be able to watch not just the After Dark show for this episode, but for any episode that we had an After Dark show, as well as enhanced content. For example, we just did Rick Tumlinson's meeting. There's a 20-minute version that's available for free, and like an hour-and-a-half version available for Epic subscribers. And let me tell you, hour-and-a-half version, way better than the 20-minute version, only for Epic subscribers. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you in a week.